What about Hamas in the West Bank? We're starting to hear about that. Well, there's the Hamas leaders are living in the West Bank. They're in the West Bank. I worry about the West Bank now with the escalation of this type of these claims that Hamas is there. But there have been a lot of claims that Hamas's popularity is growing in the West Bank. Is there any truth to that?
There is a growth of the support to resistance in principle. Not. I mean, Hamas is a resistance movement in their mind, in people's minds, and that's why they get more support. But that doesn't mean they can get majority in any future elections. I always said in many news outlets that one of the main problems why we are in this situation is because in 2021, finally, we were about to have our democratic elections in Palestine. Elections that we've been deprived from for so many years since 2006. And just about the time when we were going to have these elections, all the polls were showing, the declared polls and the secret polls, which I also saw, they all showed that neither Fatah nor Hamas will be capable of getting an absolute majority. We would have had a pluralistic democratic system, and that would have led to a new situation where no single party could govern alone in any part, whether West Bank or Gaza. No one party rule, kind of. And unfortunately, Israel blocked these elections. United States did not support these elections. The great democratic country did not support our democratic elections. And of course, the Palestinian Authority all canceled the elections. And that was a grave mistake. Had we have elections, I bet you we would not have had this war at all. I'm sure.
There's been a lot of accusation.
In the future, we should also have democratic free elections. I hear news and stories about what would the next day look like and who will be governing Palestinians. We don't need anybody to govern us. We can govern ourselves. We don't need anybody to be imposed on us. And it is unacceptable that President Biden stands up and says that the Palestinian government must be acceptable to Israel. Why? Why should we be acceptable by our occupier? Would he say that any Israeli government should be acceptable by us? Or would he say that the French government should be accepted by the British government? That is unacceptable. It's
Right.
silly. And by the way, the same thing about this issue of ethnic cleansing, that it's better for Palestinians to be evicted. Would anybody dare to go to Holland and tell the Dutch people you have to be evicted to Belgium? Could anybody even think about that? Why we, the Palestinians, are not accepted as equal human beings to others? Why? We're the most educated people in the Middle East. We've built so many countries in the Gulf. Our engineers and doctors and nurses and professionals. We're very similar to the Israelis, by the way, in many ways. And we have great musicians and great writers and great poets. We're a proud nation. And why should we be treated like this? I don't understand. To be honest with you, during these 2 months, I have inside me this huge amount of resentment that is growing. How could the world treat us as such? I don't understand.
What is the ultimate solution? I know, like a two-state solution, a one-state solution. What do you think the ultimate solution is for the Palestinian people?
For many, many years, I supported two-state solution. I was an advocate of two-state solution. And 15th of May this year, I wrote an article in The Guardian where I said that the two-state solution is dead. And I said so because Israel has built so many settlements and because the world community, and in particular the United States of America, was not ready to tell Israel enough is enough and stop settlement building. Now we have a more complicated situation. In that article, I advocated that the only alternative to one apartheid state is one democratic state, where we can all equally live together, as we did with Jewish people before. Before there was the rise of this nationalist Zionism and before Europe imposed on us the Balfour Declaration and all of the rest, and before the Holocaust. But now I know it's much more difficult to have a one-state solution. That's why I say we can have two-state solution if the world, and in particular the United States, would help us force the Israelis to remove the settlements from the West Bank. Because you cannot have a two-state solution with 750,000 settlers sitting on our land in the West Bank. If they don't accept that, then the only alternative will be one democratic state. But their third alternative is ethnic cleansing. And that we will not allow. We will resist it. We will struggle against it with everything we have.
Is it possible that the settlements could stay in the West Bank, but be under Palestinian Authority at that point? Like, hey, if you can stay if you want to stay, but you're not in Israel anymore. You live in Palestine. You either accept it or you go.
They would never accept that, but if they want, they're most welcome. But if they say that settlers can live in near Ramallah because they like the hills of Ramallah, I would like to live in Jaffa because that's where my father lived, and it's a beautiful city. And it's also Palestinian. Jaffa was always the most important Palestinian city. I mean, before Israel was established, it was the commercial, industrial, and cultural center of Palestine.
Right.
So
but just
they want to
before,
live near Ramallah. I want to live in Jaffa.
sure, but I'm talking about the Jewish Israelis who currently live there now, similar to the Arabs, the Palestinians living in Israel that never left.
You can't compare that. Why? Because for two reasons. First of all, the Palestinians who live in Israel are original Palestinians who lived there for all their lives. Their families lived there. We go back to 4,000 years ago. And it's the same people. It's like the people who were evicted from the area. These people remained. And they are living in their homeland where they have lived all their lives. These settlers are coming from other countries.
Right.
And they are coming to the West Bank in an illegal manner, stealing our land. If they can prove that they own the land, they're most welcome to stay and become Palestinian citizens.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. What about the idea of what prior to 1967, Jordan being in control of the West Bank, Egypt being in control of Gaza? What about the idea of that, of some sort of return to that?
No way. Why? We've struggled so hard to have self-determination. Originally, we should have had a state in 1948 because the United Nations decided in 1947 that Palestine should be divided in two countries, Israel on 54% of the land and Palestine on 44% of the land. We eventually accepted through Oslo Agreement a very painful compromise, accepting a state in only 22%, less than half of what UN decided we should have. We need to govern ourselves. We don't need to be governed by other countries. We need to have self-determination. If Kosovo can have that, if Croatia can have that, why Palestinians can't have that? We don't need to be ruled neither by Jordanians or Egyptians. We need to rule ourselves. And the whole world is recognizing Palestine. 130 countries recognize Palestine. Palestine is a state in the United Nations with observer status. If the world cares about the future, they should recognize Palestine immediately, and it will be a state at the moment under occupation, so that occupation would end. But to have any other country ruling us is unacceptable.
How do you
And
then?
Jordan, by the way, doesn't want that, and Egypt doesn't want that.
Right. No, I
Because
understand.
both countries consider this as a security risk for them.
Why is it a security risk for them?
For Egyptians, they say that if Palestinians are evicted to Egypt, this would be a security risk because this would mean that Egypt would be drawn practically into a war situation with Israel. That's what the Jordanians say.
I'm just thinking it would be easier to gain sovereignty from Jordan and from Egypt than it is from Israel, because Israel clearly is not easy to work with and almost impossible to work with.
That is if Israel is ready to end the occupation. But that's not what they proposed. What Israel is proposing is to keep the land under their control and to keep security control of the West Bank, and maybe have another country like Egypt to take care of the humanitarian needs of the people under occupation. And Jordan is the same, but Israel remains as the ruling power
Yeah.
and the security power.
So you would be more willing to accept, theoretically, if this were to happen, you'd be more willing to accept Israel saying, all right, we're annexing everything and we're all Israelis now. So everybody's an Israeli, everyone's given equal rights, everyone's given democracy, human rights. Now you're an Israeli living in the West Bank. You're more willing to accept that than if Jordan came in and said, now you're a Jordanian and you can have Jordanian rights and Jordanian citizenship, and then work on having an autonomous region within Jordan where it becomes, the Palestine, then it would be easier, I think, to gain a Palestine from Jordan. But you'd be more willing to accept Israeli sovereignty over Jordanian sovereignty?
No, that's not what I said. I said we are ready to accept either two-state solution with Israelis withdrawing completely from West Bank and Gaza, allowing us to have our own independent state and having any form of security presence on the borders. That's one option. The second option is that we have one democratic free state, and that state will not be Jewish only.
Right.
And that means we will have equal rights, which means I could run to be the prime minister of that state. So
Right,
it's not
right.
like we become just Israelis. It becomes
Sure.
a completely different entity.
Right. Yeah. And probably the name would change. It wouldn't be able to stay Israel. Maybe it'd be Israel Palestine. Maybe it'd be both. Maybe it would be, if there was one democratic nation with all people having a choice in that, right. It wouldn't be a Jewish nation only. It would be a nation, the Holy
Exactly.
Land. So
Exactly.
it would definitely change. That is,
Maybe we
look,
could call it the state of the Holy Land. I mean,
that's
it's
what
a
I think they
beautiful
should
name.
do. That's exactly. I think it should just be called the Holy Land, and that's the name of the country, and people live there. And
Correct.
that is
And
ultimately.
imagine how many tourists will come to visit Jerusalem to see the
Everybody.
birthplace.
Yeah,
Three
everybody would.
religions, not one. You see how God has been so generous with us. Three religions, not one.
Yes. Yeah.
Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.